Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Leaders of Impact with myself, Leslie Buckman. In this episode, we're actually going to follow on from episode 5 where we started to touch on AI, its impact on leaders and the pressure to keep up. Now in this episode, we're going to go through on AI burnout. Now yes, there's so many benefits, absolutely, and they're going to be very specific to you, the way that you work, your organization and your team. However, I would like you to be very aware of how it can present itself in burnout, and you might already be facing it, because even where we started to speak about the pressure to keep up, be ahead of the game with new releases, even though you're probably, and you know what, I shouldn't assume, you may be just learning each, because it is so fast in advancement that we've got this pressure to keep up. But the thing is, when you have got this force driving you and you're always feeling like you're behind the game, you put pressure on yourself, then you put pressure on your team to keep up at a momentum that may not be sustainable. So there are a few things that can play out here. It increases the cognitive stress, emotional stress, the well-being. So it's really interesting. Us as humans, we constantly try and come up with different things, different ways to be sharper, to innovate, to evolve. But also we speak so much about well-being and health. And when we can bring those two things together, it is going to be really, really powerful on the occasions that it does happen. I mean, there's so much technology out there that really does support well-being, for tracking, for information, for data. So there are things out there very much that are absolutely incredible. But for the burnout side, it's very ironic that whereas we continually try to look for well-being practices within workplaces, we talk about being able to take a step back, to reflect, make sure we spend time in nature, look after ourselves, all these things. And we know all the basic things that we should be doing. But what happens is we continually come up with ways to try and make our lives easier and to try and take a lot of workload off, which interestingly does actually come back and hit us straight in the face. In that, by trying to automate everything, by trying to make your life easier, to not have to think, even for your team, I've seen so many organizations now where they are training their teams on how to prompt AI better to get better responses. And it makes sense, absolutely. If you've got workflow, if you're relying on it for its output, you need to have good prompt. But what I'm not seeing enough of is the encouragement to retain your own thought processes, to retain your own thought leadership, the ideation there, thinking about ideas and reflecting on things and processing and having that critical thinking. We're very much losing this skill, and we can't. Because I tell you what, all the things that we're trying to replace in ourselves to get the efficiencies, workflows, processes, the one thing when it keeps on impacting ourselves and our health and burning out, that's not something that AI can replace. It's not something that, if we keep on going down this path, it gets a lot harder to come back from. In that, I mean, if we lose the ability to think for ourselves, to ask questions of ourselves, and encourage also feedback and thoughts from other people, and in a way that sometimes does really contrast with our own, where we may not like the response, where it challenges our beliefs, where it challenges what we think, we're losing the ability to be able to listen to things and voices and experiences that are very different to our own. We are now in an environment where we are seeing so many people so oversensitized to things that are said that are different outside of what they think. So how does this come back onto AI burnout for leaders? So number one is, I've said about the pressure to keep up, to maintain advancement in whatever industry you're in, the pressure to make decisions based on the information that you're getting, because then you've also got the extra level of having to verify the output, to validate what's coming out, that if you're making decisions on it, how correct is it? Because you and I both know sometimes what's produced isn't always fact-based. There's also the challenge, the added pressure, that if you're encouraging your team to essentially stop thinking for themselves and go to having something else thinking for them, you're actually training your team to stop coming up with solutions. You're training them to almost dull down their own ability to have thought-provoking conversations. So say, for example, and I did send out a newsletter the other week, and it was on encouragement of not using AI to write your own emails or to respond to someone. Because if you're doing that all the time, if you say, oh, I'm not sure how this is going to land with someone, hey, Claude or ChatGPT, can you just reframe this so it sounds firm but fair, or firm but respectful, firm but kind, whatever it is, because you're not sure if your words and languaging delivers that. If you keep on doing that in the written form, what will happen is if you get in the situation where you need to have a direct conversation, you won't know how to respond because you've been almost training yourself to not know how to reply and giving your ability and your skill set away. When you are not using your brain, it slows down. It really does. We hear it again, use it or lose it when it comes to your muscles, your body, your brain, whatever it is. If you don't use it, you will lose it. So coming back to the leadership burnout side, if you're actually training people to literally stop thinking for themselves, you are adding another level of pressure on yourself. So you may be having frustrations if people keep on coming to you looking for the answers or asking you things that you might be thinking, come on, surely you should be able to come up with that yourself. Or if you worry about delegating because it might not be done the way that you want, or you might be thinking, I've explained this a dozen times, can you not think how, this needs to be done? You may be training them out of that unintentionally, but you may be training them away from doing that. So how that impacts you on the burnout? Frustration. Absolutely. So frustration can increase stress levels. That in turn increases cortisol. That in turn is not good for your whole body, your whole system. The other aspect is you're also putting more pressure on yourself and increasing your workload. So if your team is no longer thinking for themselves, then you have to double check not only what they're doing, but also now verify what work the AI processes are generating. You've actually given yourself another layer of work to check up on. It also may be that if you're trying to work through and delegate and it keeps on coming back to you, again, your workload has increased. Your capacity is not. You've got a certain limit of what you can do. Things that you can do about this. And look, this is a short episode and there's so much more in this. So even if you start researching for yourself and not asking, humor me here, it's not that I'm against AI. What I am pro is human thought. So, being able to take time out, and this is one of the solutions or tips that I have for you, is start to look at where are you using it that you really need to use it. Because there are places where AI creates improvements, 100%. But where are you using it where you don't need to? Are you denying yourself and your team the space to really think critically, to analyze things, to review your communication, to review your ability to have difficult conversations and take on different ideas? Are you reducing your ability to think around situations yourself without going down to AI and typing it in and, asking a question, how do I get around this? Because the thing is, with everything AI based, you are sourcing what is already there, already known. When you access your own brain, that's when you get the creative thinking. That's when you can think deeper, more innovatively, because you're exploring things that maybe haven't come in yet. I mean, I know there's a term that there's no original thought, but explore that, because it has to be some original thought, otherwise we wouldn't progress. So what can you do is, number one, start really analysing everywhere that it is used. Then start to break it down, saying, great, this is where we should be using it. This is where it gives us a real good advantage. This is where it streamlines our business. This is where it streamlines our processes. But then also look, where are we using it where we shouldn't be? Is it restricting thought? Is it adding pressure? Are you having to do more work? And I encourage you to sometimes take the step back to review this. And it's interesting, whenever we talk about taking a step back, sometimes like, no, but I have too much to do this. If you don't sometimes step back and really look at, like, zoom out to look at things, when you don't take time to do this, then you're too immersed. And this is, again, where pressure builds. Slow down to speed up. So number one is do a bit of an audit, do a review there on where it is used and where it's great to use and where you perhaps don't need to use it. I would also encourage you to start looking at how you can create space for more thought activation. Do you have space to really, where you put all technology aside and where you can bounce ideas off? So, having think tank about your business, your industry, what's being done, how you serve your client, how you improve yourself, what growth are you putting in place? So don't lose all of the human element. Bring that in, because that is your edge. As soon as you use everything for AI, you're actually leveling down. So human edge is really powerful and it's so much more enjoyable. It stretches your brain, it challenges you. It can increase engagement, it can increase connection, relationships. Now, the other thing that I would suggest is, so we've got the audit, review, we've also got think tank. Third, and there's so many things, but other third important thing is taking the time out for even yourself and encouraging your people to do this. Sit in nature. no technology, literally sit in nature. And even if you give yourself an intentional subject that you're going to think about, and write ideas down yourself, allow that to come through. It's really fascinating when you start doing this to see what comes up for you. Even, surprise yourself. Thoughts drop in when you create the space to do it. So how much time are you giving yourself? How much time are your people giving themselves? This is a really interesting subject, and it's something that I encourage you to look through. With the overall intention is, how do you keep the human edge within this? How do you still really lean into these amazing human conversations, connection, thought processes? I would love to hear from you if you do any of this, what the outcome has been, what you're doing as a result. Has there been any interesting insights for you that you've found? Has there been something you've done differently? Once you start putting in place more of the, space to think creatively, has there been something else identified or thought of or put forward? Are your team also learning more to be able to speak up with their own thoughts and, speak through that side of things? Thank you so much for listening or watching. I will see you in episode 7. And, as always, if you've got questions on this or something else that you'd like me to cover, drop us a contact, send us a message or an email. Thank you so much.